This happened 3 years ago in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. I was 26 and had been hiking solo for about 5 years at that point. I wasn't reckless about it. I always told people where I was going, carried proper gear, knew my limits. I'd planned a day hike on a trail I'd done twice before. It was rated moderate, about 8 miles round trip with decent elevation gain, but nothing crazy. I started early, around 7 a.m., because I wanted to be off the mountain before dark. The first half of the hike was completely normal. Beautiful weather, clear trail markers, a few other hikers heading up. I reached the summit around 11 and took a lunch break. The view was incredible. You could see from miles in every direction. I started heading back down around noon. That's when I noticed something off. There was a trail marker I didn't remember seeing on the way up. It was one of those wooden posts with colored blazes painted on it, indicating different trail routes. This one had a yellow blaze, but the trail I was on was marked with blue blazes. I stopped and pulled out my map. According to the map, there was no yellow trail intersecting with this route. I figured maybe it was an old marker from a trail that had been rerouted or closed. I kept following the blue blazes like I was supposed to. About 20 minutes later, I came across another yellow marker, then another. They were appearing more frequently, always just slightly off the main trail, like they were trying to lead me in a different direction. I started feeling uneasy. Something about those markers felt wrong. They looked new, not weathered like the official trail markers, and they were positioned in a way that felt deliberate, like someone had placed them recently. I made sure to stick to the blue blaze trail and ignore the yellow ones, but they kept appearing. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The yellow markers were forming a pattern. They were circling back on themselves, creating a loop that led away from the main trail and into denser forest. I picked up my pace. I wanted to get back to the trailhead as fast as possible, but the yellow markers kept appearing, more frequently now. Some of them had been driven into the ground within the past few hours. I could tell because the dirt around the posts was still fresh. Then I heard something that made me stop walking. Footsteps, not animal footsteps, human footsteps, moving through the brush parallel to the trail. They were keeping pace with me, staying just out of sight. I called out, asking if someone needed help. No response. The footsteps stopped. I waited for maybe 30 seconds, then started walking again. The footsteps resumed immediately. I was about 2 miles from the trailhead at this point. I decided to just run. I didn't care how stupid it looked or how tired I'd get. I needed to be around other people. I ran for maybe 10 minutes straight, my pack bouncing against my back, my lungs burning. When I finally slowed down, the footsteps were gone, but as I rounded a bend in the trail, I saw something that made me stop dead. There was a yellow marker directly in the middle of the trail, not off to the side, right in the center, blocking my path. And this one was different. Someone had carved something into the wood below the painted blaze. I got close enough to read it. It said, "Follow," in rough, hand-carved letters. I stepped around it and kept moving. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my water bottle. I didn't look back. I just focused on getting to my car. When I finally reached the trailhead parking lot, there were a few other cars there, but no people in sight. I got in my car, locked the doors, and sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm down. Then I saw him. A man was standing at the edge of the parking lot, right where the trail emerged from the woods. He was wearing hiking clothes but no pack. He was just standing there, watching my car. I started my engine and drove away immediately. In my rearview mirror, I saw him walk back into the woods. I reported everything to the Forest Service the next day. I told them about the yellow markers, the footsteps, the man in the parking lot. They said they'd send rangers to check it out. A week later, I got a call from a ranger. He said they'd found the yellow markers and removed them. There were over 40 of them, all placed within a 3-mile stretch of trail. They formed a path that led deep into the forest, away from any established trails. The ranger said they followed the path to its end. It led to a small clearing where someone had been camping. There was a tent, supplies, and a notebook. He wouldn't tell me what was in the notebook, but he said I should be glad I didn't follow those markers. He also said they found something else. Photographs. Multiple photographs of solo hikers on that trail, taken from a distance with a zoom lens. The ranger asked me to come in and see if I was any of them. I was. There were 3 photos of me from that day, taken at different points on my hike up. Someone had been following me from the start. They never found the man. The campsite was abandoned by the time the rangers got there, and he'd cleared out all his gear. The ranger said they increased patrols in the area, but couldn't maintain a permanent presence. I still hike, but never alone anymore, and I pay a lot more attention to trail markers now. If something doesn't match my map exactly, I turn around immediately, because I keep thinking about what was at the end of that path. What was in that clearing that the ranger wouldn't tell me about?
And what would have happened if I'd been curious enough or confused enough to follow those yellow markers into the woods?
Last summer, my boyfriend and I went hiking in the Adirondacks. We'd been dating for about a year and wanted to do a weekend backpacking trip. We planned to hike in about 6 miles, set up camp near a lake, and hike out the next day. We started on a Saturday morning around 9 a.m. The trail was well marked and moderately trafficked. We passed several groups heading in the opposite direction, people finishing up their trips. Everyone seemed normal and friendly. Around 2 p.m., we reached a junction where our trail intersected with another route. There was a wooden sign showing distances to various destinations. We stopped to take a break and check our map. While we were sitting there, an older couple approached from the other trail. They were probably in their 60s, wearing matching fleece jackets, looking like experienced hikers. They said hello and asked where we were headed. We told them about our camping spot at the lake. The man got this weird look on his face. He glanced at his wife, then back at us, and said we should consider turning around. When we asked why, he said they'd been trying to get to that same lake for 2 days and kept ending up back at this junction. We thought he was joking at first, but his wife nodded seriously and said they couldn't figure out what they were doing wrong. Every time they followed the signs toward the lake, they'd hike for hours and somehow end up back at this exact spot. My boyfriend kind of laughed and said they must be misreading the map. The man didn't laugh. He pulled out his map and showed us the route. It was the same route we were planning to take. He said they'd tried it 4 separate times yesterday and 3 times already today. I didn't know what to say. The whole thing sounded crazy. My boyfriend suggested they might be dehydrated or confused and offered them some water. They declined and said they were heading back to the trailhead. The man said we should too, but he wouldn't explain why. After they left, my boyfriend and I discussed whether we should continue. We decided the couple had probably gotten disoriented somehow, maybe went off trail without realizing it. We'd be careful and pay close attention to the markers. We continued toward the lake. The trail was clear and easy to follow. We saw blue blazes on the trees every 100 feet or so. Nothing seemed wrong. We hiked for about 2 hours. According to the sign, the lake should have been 3 miles from the junction, which meant we should have reached it by now, but we hadn't seen it yet. My boyfriend said we were probably just moving slower than we thought because of our packs. We kept hiking. Another hour passed, still no lake. We stopped to check the map. According to our calculations, we should have definitely reached it by now. In fact, we should have passed it. That's when I noticed something. Up ahead, maybe 50 yards, there was a wooden sign at a trail junction. It looked exactly like the sign where we'd met the couple. My boyfriend saw it too. We walked up to it and confirmed what we'd both been thinking. It was the same sign. Same exact wording, same distances, same everything. We'd somehow hiked in a complete circle and ended up back where we started. But that was impossible. We'd been following blue blazes the entire time, never deviating from the trail. There was no way we could have looped back without noticing. My boyfriend was convinced we'd gotten confused somewhere. He suggested we try again but pay even closer attention to the markers. I didn't want to, but I agreed. We'd come all this way and I didn't want to give up that easily. We started hiking again. This time we counted the blazes. We took photos of landmarks. We were meticulous about staying on trail. We even marked some of the trees with small pieces of flagging tape so we'd know if we passed them again. 2 hours later, we were standing in front of that same sign. We'd taken photos of rocks, bent trees, stream crossings. None of them had appeared twice. We'd followed the blazes exactly. We'd never seen our flagging tape again, which meant we hadn't retraced our steps. But somehow, impossibly, we'd ended up at the junction again. My boyfriend wasn't laughing anymore. I could tell he was scared, even though he was trying to hide it. I was terrified. The whole situation made no sense. It violated basic geography and logic. We sat down and tried to figure out what to do. It was getting late, probably around 6 p.m. We had maybe 3 hours of daylight left. We didn't have enough water to spend the night at this junction, and we definitely didn't want to try reaching the lake again. We decided to hike back to the trailhead. We'd follow the trail in the opposite direction, back the way we'd come that morning. That route had worked fine. We knew it led back to the parking lot. We started hiking out. The trail looked familiar, showing all the landmarks we remembered from the morning. We were making good progress. After about an hour, we should have been getting close to the parking lot. Instead, we arrived at the junction. Again, the same wooden sign, the same spot where we'd met that couple and where we'd been stuck for hours. But we'd been hiking in the opposite direction. We should have been moving away from the junction, back towards civilization. There was no logical way we could have ended up here again. I started crying. I couldn't help it. My boyfriend tried to calm me down, but I could tell he was losing it too. We were both exhausted, scared, and running out of water. That's when we noticed something. Off to the side of the junction, barely visible in the fading light, was a path. It wasn't marked on the map. There were no blazes. It was just a narrow footpath leading into dense forest. We stood there looking at it. Every hiking rule says don't go off established trails, but the established trails weren't working. They were somehow broken, looping back on themselves in a way that shouldn't be possible. My boyfriend said we should try the unmarked path. I said absolutely not. We argued for a few minutes. Finally, he said he'd go check it out quickly while I waited at the junction. If it didn't lead anywhere, he'd come right back. I didn't want to be alone, but I also didn't want to follow some random path into the woods at dusk. He promised he'd be gone less than 10 minutes. He left his pack with me and walked down the path. 15 minutes passed, he didn't come back. I called his name, no response. I called louder, nothing.
I knew I had to go after him. I put on my pack and started down the path. It was narrow and overgrown, clearly not maintained. After about 5 minutes, it opened up into a small clearing. My boyfriend was standing there, completely still, staring at something. I called his name and he turned around. His face was white. He pointed. There was a tent in the clearing. Next to it was camping gear, a backpack, supplies. It all looked abandoned, but recent, like someone had left in a hurry. And next to the tent, lying on the ground, was a wooden sign. The same sign from the junction. Same wood, same carved letters, same distances. Except it was impossible for the sign to be here. We'd just seen it at the junction 5 minutes ago. Signs don't move, they're anchored in the ground. My boyfriend grabbed my arm and said we needed to leave immediately. Not back to the junction, just away from this clearing, in any direction that led out. We crashed through the forest, not following any path, just trying to get away. Branches tore at our clothes, we fell multiple times, but we kept moving. After maybe 20 minutes of running, we stumbled onto a trail. We had no idea which trail, but we didn't care. We followed it, and eventually, finally, we saw the parking lot. Our car was there. We threw our packs in the trunk and drove away without even taking them off properly. We drove for an hour before we felt safe enough to stop. We never reported it. What would we even say? That we got lost and panicked? That trail somehow looped impossibly? That we found a campsite with a sign that shouldn't have been there? I looked up that trail online later. Other people have reported getting disoriented in that area. Some hikers say they've experienced similar loops, hiking for hours only to end up at the same spot. The Forest Service says it's easy to get turned around if you're not paying attention, but we were paying attention. We were meticulous, and I know what I saw. That sign in the clearing, the same sign that should have been bolted to the ground at the junction. I don't know what happened in those woods. I don't know if it was something psychological, some mass hallucination, or something else entirely, but I know we weren't the only ones. That couple warned us, and whoever owned that abandoned campsite had figured out the same thing we did. The marked trails don't work. They loop back on themselves. The only way out is to go off trail, to break the rules. And that scares me more than anything else, because it means someone or something designed it that way.